So we'll go ahead and get started. So you've all have already figured out this is my father, who lives in Colorado. Are you in Aurora or Denver now?
Aurora.
Aurora, Colorado. Okay. Um, Mr. Van graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in African American Studies from Metropolitan State University in Denver, which is also one of my alma maters. So, if you don't mind me sharing this, and this is what my daughter Sarah told me. I don't know how she got this information, but she
Okay.
said at the time that you graduated at 68 or 72,
72.
72, that you were the oldest person to have graduated from the university at that time.
At
That
that
is
time.
okay. I guess she did some research.
Mhm.
I didn't know that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Glad to try to share my remembrance and all that with you today. I'm 80. Well, I'll be 83 in about a week. So, an 83-year-old, short-term memories, sometimes, subject to senior moments, and my long-term memories are good. So I remember how the Juneteenth was when I was a boy. It was about 85 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that we were still celebrating the Juneteenth. We were still picking cotton. We did a lot of field work. We lived in the city, but times were hard because the only work that you could get was what they call colored boy work back then, and that's just the lowest paid. Somebody said, okay, they remember those days. But those were the lowest paid work we could get. And we would have to Dad would take the family out. We three oldest boys would do the actual field work, and he drove the truck and rounded up the people to, the other workers, and he would also take the cotton to the gin and so forth like that. So he made pretty good. I never saw him touch a cotton boll, neither did my mother, but my father had picked cotton in his days, and he was born in 1904, and it hadn't changed that much. I say this because Juneteenth, we're celebrating this as a day of freedom when we got emancipated and cut through, and boy, a fellow my age should be doing well financially or economically, but if not, I went into the Air Force in 1956. I spent 6.5 years. During that time, I became an aircraft hydraulic mechanic. I worked on the flight line. I learned a little aircraft electrics. I went to the what did they call that? The old cadet aviation cadet academy. I accumulated about 300 hours then, and I may be a little off on the hours, but I flew reciprocating and jet engine aircraft. And when I came back to Texas, that wasn't any job for me. I didn't pick any more cotton after 16, but I was just saying that things haven't changed. Now, going back to when I was 10 years old, I can remember that. This was about 1950. Juneteenth coming, a big celebration. And this is the only thing we knew about the Juneteenth historically was at first it was a day they freed the slaves, nothing else. Not like today where they got all of the information that they share. And I'm going to share a little bit with you. But our way of celebrating the Juneteenth then at that time, just in ignorance of what it was, we like to dress up and get what we can of clothes. There were two meat packing. Fort Worth was a big meat packing center at that time. Swifts and Armours, and they would give free barbecue, and they'd cook it, and they'd come to a small park near us called Greenway Park, and we would go there, and that's what I mostly liked was that free food and that barbecue, and there seemed to be enough of it. Uh, we also would have our private get-togethers, families are in homes, stuff like that, people barbecuing in the backyard, neighbors stopping by, loud music and so forth. There was a sad little thing to that is today we have people who join in with us on the Juneteenth, people of various races and ethnicities. Not then. I'm going to speak truth to you and frank. Then it was known as Nigger Day, and it was a day of mocking and so forth. So about, we'd driving, the white kids would drive by and they'd, hey, nigger, better run, that kind of thing. So I still love the Juneteenth at that time. And I think I've gotten into the middle part of my speech, and I'm going to go back to the first. Now, the Juneteenth historically, and hang on, was the day, it was January the 1st, 1983, that Abraham Lincoln, by executive order, issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, this was some maneuvering and political maneuvering and chicanery going on there as well, because he knew that the southern states, the states that he referred to as states being in rebellion, should set the slaves free, that they were free, he said, by executive order. So the South, then, just had a trumpet go off in there, the South, already figuring that the Union was had no legal right to them. They didn't consider themselves as illegal rebels, but they felt that they had a right to do that, and they felt that such an order as the Emancipation Proclamation was illegal to them. So they just kept right on holding the people in slavery. Now, what they did do is they took and in their large cotton operations, they moved them all the way to Texas, down here, East Texas, South Texas, just south of you guys. I picked cotton all down through there because I wasn't there then. But they moved the states out of the more populated eastern area so they could continue to move it. As you may recall, cotton was one of the things that helped our agrarian society. The United States wanted to be, Thomas Jefferson then wanted it to be an agrarian society. And so they made a lot of money on cotton. That cotton went out to England and the rest of the world and to the northern mills in the United States. So there was a lot of money in that. And when they could get it for free labor, boy, they really enjoyed that. Because we didn't get anything, the slave didn't benefit any financially. He lived in the worst conditions. I saw the slave shacks still out some 85 years after slavery. They were still down on those old plantations in the South. So I saw them. I saw the fields. I saw the fences that had been made of rock where the slaves had cleared those big old rocks and lined them up down through there. A kind of job that I wouldn't want to do as a strong young man of 16 when I stopped. So at any rate, General Gordon Granger came to Galveston on June 19th, 1985, some 200 years, but not 200 years, some 2.5 years. It was 4 or 5 months in there, and forced the people in Texas to let the slaves go free, the enslaved people. Now, what we're here today is from all of the various sources that will tell you about the Juneteenth. I got a lot of things of what they say. It's that the people started the jubilation right there in Galveston, and it was, such a happy day that we're finally free and that kind of thing. But the truth is there are many of us today who don't feel that the Juneteenth is what we're making it out to be. We have, like I said, people of other races and so forth joining in with us, but we just haven't had that kind of progress as a Black race in the United States today. And it's not so much our fault. we all know that there's been discrimination in the workforce, discrimination in our education, discrimination in the courts by the police. And we think that those who join us in this celebration now should take it in mind that, well, we'll celebrate the Juneteenth, but we've still got a lot of work to go. We wish that you would set your hearts to looking at that condition, and let's get it where we can all be free. You know what freedom feel like, because you in 1777 said, we're going to break with you, King George, and you whipped him. It took a few years, but you whipped him and you got free. And when you trounce your enemy or overcome the circumstances that have held you down, you feel great inside. You feel empowered by all of that. Those of our Mexican friends to the south, when they put it to the French there and got out from under theirs there on May the 5th, they got something to celebrate and feel empowered by. But we were let go, and the conditions under which we were let go were anything but something to celebrate about, because Lincoln further advised us to stay where you are, work for wages, but there wasn't any machinery to see how we could get paid or not. And the South, the Southern people still had, when they came back in, they still had good political power. So we were there to be cheated by it. And if we worked on our own like that, the land still belonged to the white growers, and they would let us work, not for money, but a share of the crop, sharecroppers. And, a lot of white people were caught in that sharecropping thing. Sometimes they called them tenant farmers. But you know that there's no fair way to come out of that. And what I'm saying is that we were let free on paper, but it never moved. Our brothers and sisters around us of other races and strong political power just hadn't found it yet that they could do more. Maybe I feel that way. I would, if the shoe was on the other foot, maybe I wouldn't want to dig in my pockets and personally put out the money, because I thought, well, I worked for it. But that's not the problem. It's not you that should make up the money. It's our government. Our government. Slavery was legal in our government until the Southerners want to keep all the money, which they felt that they and their 3/5 of a human being worked for. So I'm probably not telling you what you wanted to know about the Juneteenth. If you want facts and figures, I just want to tell you that there's nothing really to celebrate, but we celebrated because it was all we had. But to say that it's a day of freedom is a misnomer, because it's not a day of freedom, and it hasn't proved to be all these years since the Juneteenth there in 1985. That's 1865. I told you about those senior moments. But I think it would be better. I mean, you could at any time. I don't know how long I've been on it. She told me 15 minutes, but if I get to talking, I'll go over that, and I might be under it. But she did say that Rachel, that's who she is, that I wanted to leave some room there for questions so you could ask me and I could tell you specifically what you want. You've heard from me a little bit of the history, but you know it. There's plenty of it floating around out there, and a lot of it's different. But if you want to know a person who has actually loved and began to shy away from the Juneteenth in my latter years, I'm here to answer your question as truthfully before God as I can. Anybody have any question? Put it to me. No? How many minutes did I go? Did I go more than 15?
I wasn't looking at the time, honestly.
I wasn't. Yeah.
I think you were close. I think you were close to 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Van, I just want to say, as that generation that came right behind you, we kind of caught a little bit of that, but not as much as you and my parents and grandparents.
Right.
But we're kind of on your shoulders. And I just want to thank you, sir, from the bottom of my heart, because if it wasn't for people like you and my parents who fought that fight with Dr. King, my parents marched with them. They made people go to the polls. They used their cars when other folks didn't have cars. So I was always part of that community involvement of trying to make things happen for better for everybody. So I just want to thank you, sir, because of you, I am.
Thank you. And I didn't march with King, and what I did along those lines in Fort Worth was very small, but I did what I could. Because I'll say this, for Fort Worth, as hard a time as they gave me during that time, when it came time to change over and integrate, Fort Worth was one of the fewer cities there was no fight about it in. They obeyed the law and moved over. Still no freedom there, you know, for the blacks don't have as much freedom as whites. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to lay a guilt trip on you. I'm just trying to point out things because I know that you're in a business that strives to help people. And I've looked at your website. I've talked to Rachel. You guys are really trying to help people, and you want to be right. We want this country to be one nation under God. And in God we trust, and on our money it says it doesn't say it, but it has a symbol in Latin that means he has smiled on our undertaking. So we want our thing to do that. You're good people, and I know that because you're in a business that helps other people. But do you agree with me that the Juneteenth is not what it should be?
I think for us, I mean, we're so grateful to have your perspective, Van, because, you know, at least from my perspective, Juneteenth was not a day that was talked about. I didn't learn about it in school growing up in New Mexico. And there were pieces of history that have clearly been left out in my education. And so I think over these last few years, there has been a little bit more attention on the day, and hearing your perspective is so valuable for us because the day is important, but I think you're very right. It wasn't what it should have been, and it still isn't. We still are not in that place where we are that one nation. And I think hearing it from you is so valuable for us.
Yes, and I think that we can get there. And I'm glad that you know that. And no, people didn't know about Juneteenth. All of a sudden now, everybody celebrated Juneteenth. When I was in the Air Force, I was one of the few people, if you weren't from Texas, you didn't know about the Juneteenth, and that's logical. But now I hear they were celebrating the Juneteenth over in Indiana or back in Washington State up in the northwest corner of the world. You know, and I guess everybody's on it. We have a lady that's in Fort Worth, Miss Opal Lee. She's called the grandmother of the Juneteenth, and she's fought a lot to make it a national holiday, and that's good. And Biden just did that. That's good. But these things we ought to have done, but I didn't want us to have something that's going to ring hollow, because that isn't what this country should stand for. And we've had enough of that throughout, not only in Black lives, but in our politics and in our religion or stuff like that. And we want to get back on the road to being a righteous nation so that God can bless us and turn away these flus and hurricanes and things like that. If you believe that kind of thing, and I do. Is that it?
Mr. Van? Well, Mr.
No.
Van, I had a question. I'm Maria. I'm wondering what you think, and I appreciate your honesty and your perspective, like Sam. I feel it. I feel it in my heart. But I'm wondering what you think our next steps are. And I agree with you that right now it's just a date, and there still needs to be a lot of information that catches up, and there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of hurt, and just a lot. But from your perspective, what do you think our next step is now that we have this date?
Well, I think that it's important for us to, as I said, to celebrate, but that at least we can have an acknowledgement that there's still work to do somewhere when we celebrate, like they say. I have this shirt from 1999. It's Juneteenth. What does it say? Can you see it? Well, you probably can't read it, but I'll read it. Juneteenth, a family celebration of unity in the African American community. And if you look on the backside, again, you see African Americans in so much African garb that we look like African. And it's in Denver. This was on the 20th, the 18th through the 20th. Well, that's not what then we were stuck by ourselves. You know, Juneteenth is a black holiday. And I told you the vulgar name they called it before. But we don't want it like this. If it was a day of freedom, it was a day that we became Americans and entitled to all of the benefits of Americans thereof. And we're suddenly, all of a sudden, we've turned from being an African holiday to be that all-inclusive holiday. And I think that with that turning, we should make some kind of acknowledgement that there is yet work to do. This is good. We love you. We're going to celebrate. We're going to be that way. I'm not wise enough to say what the next step should be. I wish I could. If any of my friends see this, they'd probably, why don't he say reparations? Well, I think that reparations, you know, as much as I believe in that, I do want to keep it separate from the issue of Juneteenth. You know, the celebration of Juneteenth. Reparation, well, I can say, well, Juneteenth, you know, should have been the start of reparations, and it should have been, but the president at that time, he just wanted us to stay in place where we were still under the hand of the people that he claims that he fought the Civil War over. It was his responsibility to start that ball rolling. Now, things are so mixed up politically out here. You know, critical race theory, just if I write the things that I say on paper, and I have, that's teaching critical race theory, is dividing the country, is doing all of that. But with that kind of thinking in the country, we're going to have to be a little smarter and knock that out as we move on toward the so-called reparations, because that's hard to figure. And some states are issuing reparations, which consist of, you know, some educational benefits and all that. But we've tried that with the education, and it soon fell apart after a few years, you know. But I think that what I do is I listen to God as I understand him in my heart. What shall I do now? Because I acknowledge that the thing is wrong. And then when I do that, then certainly I'm led into like-minded people, or I proceed from there. Sometimes I'm by myself, oftentimes. But I don't know the next step. The first step is to, let's be honest and call it what it is. A work in progress.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, let's don't jump right in all at once.
Well, I was going to say, if no one has anything else, we can go ahead and end our conversation.
Okay, well, as you can see, I'll block you off. You can disagree with me. I won't fight and holler. I will listen and see where I need to fix myself in that.
Okay. So,
okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being our guest speaker today and not sharing any embarrassing stories about me.
I think that was the only thing we were missing, huh, Rachel?
Oh, that was going to be on the next one here, but
yeah.
I don't think that I spoke anything that I wrote on this paper. I'm sure I didn't, but that's, you know, that's me.
Well, and I guess maybe the last thing I was thinking is, Van, if there are any resources that you do want to share with us, I'm sure that Rachel would be able to get it to the group. If there's anything that's on paper that you want us to see and have at our fingertips, we would love to have it. We're a group of learners. So anytime you have anything, we'd be glad to have it.
Okay, well, now that you asked, I'm in a writer's block now, but I am doing a memoir, and it's be quite a long one, I think. But most memoirs now are about 300 and 400 pages. It won't be that long, just a couple. And when it's finished, I'll let you know.
We would
And I
love
would
that.
enjoy, I would enjoy you to critique it and see what you really think.
Absolutely. That would be a treat.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Uh,
Mr. Van. We really appreciate it. And also, thank you for having Rachel.
Yeah. Well, she's a good one.
She's a
Uh,
good,
Yeah,
and
she's a good one. Yeah.
we love her and respect her. And so thank you for sharing her with us.
Yeah. Okay. All right, then. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Van.